Okay, so we're going to practice just midpoint and distance examples. So remember the midpoint formula is x1 plus x2 divided by 2, because we're finding the average of the x values, and then y1 plus y2 divided by 2, finding the average. Okay? All right, so here's our first example. Find the midpoint M of segment GH, where G is 7, -5, and H is 9, -1. So we need to plug this in our formula. We're finding the midpoint. x1 is 7 plus x2 is 9 divided by 2. y1 is -5. y2 is -1. So you can say plus -1 or just -1. I like to simplify, so I'll do that. Okay? And we're not solving an equation, we're just simplifying each part of the coordinate. 7 plus 9 gives us 16 over 2. -5 minus 1 gives us -6 over 2. Midpoint equals 8, -3. And we should have our final answer as a point. Okay? Now we have the next type where we're not given two endpoints, we're given an endpoint and a midpoint. So find J if K -510 is midpoint of JL segment, and L is -8, 6. Okay, so we're finding J if we know the midpoint. So we know the midpoint K is this. So instead of saying M equals, we really have -5, 10 equals. Now normally we would have x1 plus x2 over 2 and y1 plus y2 over 2. But we actually don't have an x1 and a x2. We're finding one of them. So we do know that one of the x's is -8. So we have -8 plus x over 2. And then we know that the one of the y's that corresponds to that is 6 plus y over 2. So in this case, we're actually finding a missing x and y. We're finding a missing endpoint. So I know that -5 is equal to that, and 10 is equal to that. So we're going to set up two separate equations. We have -5 equals -8 plus x over 2. And then we have 10 equals 6 plus y over 2. We can solve those equations. We did these in class. Multiply both sides by 2, -10, -8 plus x, add 8, 0 pair, x equals -2. For this one, times 2 times 2, 20 equals 6 plus y minus 6 minus 6, 0 pair, y equals 14. Now we have to put them together for our final answer because they're asking us to find J. So we're finding a point. Well, a point is made up with an x and a y. We found an x, we found a y, so our final answer is -2, 14. Okay? And if you really wanted to check your work, you could always take this point J and take the other endpoint L and calculate the midpoint using the midpoint formula and make sure that you actually get -5, 10. So that's definitely something you can do. I'm not going to take time to do that, but that's a great way to check your work. So we've talked about midpoint. Now we need to talk about distance. So find the distance between, we've got 0, -8, and 3, -2. And the distance formula is not the same thing as the midpoint formula. Those are two separate things. So always be careful and read carefully to figure out what exactly you're solving for, because some people accidentally use the midpoint formula when they had distance questions, and that's not going to get you the right answer because distance is a single number, midpoint is a coordinate. So the distance formula says d equals the square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Remember, this x2 minus x1, y2 minus y1, it's just the difference between those points, okay? All right, so let's plug in what we know. I'm going to say that this is x1 and y1, this is x2 and y2. This is the first point, and this is the second point. So we've got a big square root. We always keep that until the very end. And I have 3 minus 0 squared plus negative 2 minus negative 8 squared. When I see a double negative like this, I don't like to keep it minus negative, so I'm going to make that a positive. We're following order of operations, so we have to do whatever is on the inside of parentheses first. So we've got 3 minus 0 gives us 3 squared plus negative 2 plus 8 is 6 squared. D equals 9 plus 36. We're not done yet. We still have to simplify this. Square root 9 plus 36 is 45. So you could have your answer like this. If you put it as a decimal, this would be 6.7. But sometimes you might have to answer in simplified radical form. Simplified radical form, remember, is when you take the square root of a number, it's saying that there are no more perfect squares that you can factor out of 45. And there are perfect squares we can factor out. So just get some practice. 45 is divisible by 9 and 5. 5 is prime, so that cannot be factored. 9 is factored into 3 and 3. With a square root, you're looking for groups of 2. Got that, so this is a flashback to algebra. Anything you circle goes on the outside of the radical. So you have 3 root, whatever's left on the inside, 5. 3 root 5 is the same thing as 6.7. All right, we're going to check one more and then we're done. So again, it's distance. The 2 points are -1 and 4 and 1, -1. I wanted to have some negatives in this example. I'm going to say this is x1, y1, x2, y2. I always rewrite the distance formula so that I don't mess up what I'm plugging in. x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. And let's plug in what we know. We have a big square root sign. 1 minus -1, so that just becomes +1, or minus -1 if you want to write that. y2 is -1 minus y1, which is 4 squared. Okay. All right, square root. Simplify the inside. 1 plus 1 is 2 squared plus -1 minus 4 gives us -5 squared. Sorry, that's a plus sign. All right. Square root 4 plus 25, almost done. Square root of 29. Can't really reduce that at all, but you can make it a decimal, 5.4. All right, that's it. Make sure you read the PDF, do the homework questions in your notebook, write down all your answers, submit the form in Google Classroom, and then check your work. So mark what you got right, what you got wrong, so that we can go over it and you know where you're at on our next class. All right, have a great one.